things that fascinate you about Russia's culture code? And what are the things that you still find hard to adjust to?
If we were to walk into a Russian office and say, right, I want you all to be like Americans. I want you all to be nice to each other. I want you to smile, say everyone that they have a nice day, kind of thing. You have to be very careful about changing cultures. And also, I think, especially in a Russian context, if you go down that line of everyone being nice to each other as the sort of as their first position, it will very quickly lose any value. It's one of the nice things about Russia is that people aren't very smiley necessarily, but when they do smile, 99% it's a genuine smile. It's a very interesting thing with the hospitality industry here. Everyone's saying from the Western side of hospitality, we can't find enough candidates who have the right sort of client-facing approach and are welcoming. Maybe this is something that annoys me about Russia, is this paradox where between how people are in that, again, it goes back to our thing about the coconut against the peach culture. Russians as a people are incredibly hospitable to their friends and people that, friends of friends, that they throw their doors open, and the Ruski stol, the heaving table of food and drink. But as soon as they had the problem of people working in the hospitality industry, as soon as you give them a job, and that is their job to be welcoming, they don't want to do it. I think it's getting better. And again, it's the younger generation coming through. They want to enjoy every aspect of their life, including the work part. And I think that's part of a global trend, obviously. But Russia is part of that.
Do you think that Russia is a collectivist culture, or is it tending to be more individualistic?
My favorite little vignettes about the whole cross-cultural and cultural differences is I was at an event a few years ago here in St. Petersburg, and a trainer was talking about, those kind of little graphs that you do for different nationalities in the workplace. Discipline, freedom one way, another, and then creativity and formalism on the other side. The speaker put up a few slides. The sort of the German sort of, and it was kind of the German was obviously more towards discipline and formalism. Each slide that went up for each nationality, it was a fairly gentle difference between the two. And then the speaker put up a survey that they'd done for one Russian office of the people, and it was everywhere because Ekaterina in accounts was very disciplined and hated creativity, so she was far on one side, and then there was Sergei, who was in marketing, who was completely on the other side. So within the one office, they had far more variety than you would have for an entire German nation if you surveyed all of them. So it's difficult. It's difficult to tell. I'd say the tendency now, as it is for the rest of the world, is that the governments are getting smaller, and people are more individualistic. They want fulfillment in their life, and they want it now. And the importance of the collective has become less acute.
When I lived abroad as well, and I returned home after living in Japan or living in the UK or the US, I've noticed that the hardest thing about living abroad is the reverse culture shock. When you return home, I found it really hard. It's actually harder than the actual culture shock. So when you go back home, how do you feel about things back home?
You're right. It's the reverse culture shock. When you've been away for a long time and you come home, in inverted commas. I think when you go somewhere foreign that's not your birthplace, like in your case with London or Japan or the US or wherever, you're at least mentally prepared that things will be different. When you come home, it is a little bit more of it can be more of a shock, because you expect that you're going to go straight back into the water that you jumped out of, the same river that you're stepping into. You don't know yourself whether you have changed or the place has changed. I have to say, whenever I go back to London, where I'm from, London seems a little bit bland is the wrong word. Everything seems to be quite easy. And it's strange because most people, especially most of my compatriots, most British people, they think London is this sort of buzzing, humming metropolis,
Yes.
and it is to them. After you, especially after, I mean, not so much after St. Petersburg, but especially after if you go straight from Moscow to London. London seems quite sort of even paced and normal, and it's and if you grew up imagining that your local, the city where you were born, is this kind of, as I say, this kind of beating heart of activity, and you come back to it and it seems a little bit like almost like a sort of like a tourist theme park, which has been made to look like London because everyone, I mean, it's well, it's not full of tourists at the moment, obviously, but in normal times, it seems to be just full of people not really doing that much. When I first came out in the early 90s to Moscow as a student, there was a group, I think there were about 30 of us students from various universities in the UK, from Oxford, Cambridge. I went to Glasgow. There were people from London, all over. And half of the group really just spent the 10 months they were in Moscow going between the student hostel and the institute and then back. And then at the end of that 10 months thought, oh, I've had a really bad time. I don't want to go to Russia again. The other half just went out and explored the place and opened their minds to it. It was a fascinating time. The thing I would say also, be yourself. If you don't gel with what's going on around you, then it isn't to be. But what I like about Russians, they can tell very quickly when someone is pretending to be something that they aren't. It's a complicated place to get used to. If you're trying to make yourself different at the same time, then you're really in trouble. If you remain yourself, and that's your anchor point for the rest of the around which the rest of Russia rotates, then you'll have a better chance of getting your head around it. As you say, you can't. Russia cannot be understood with the mind alone, as the man said. Yes, that is I think that's almost more difficult, because we are a difficult lot. It was one of the things my wife always used to say to me, is that, why are you always so polite? We see being polite as a virtue, but because Russians are generally more direct, goes back to what I was saying about false. If they see that you're trying to hide something because you don't want to say something to people, that's nothing that Russians find more frustrating. That's what I mean about being much more difficult for Russians to go into this sort of this very polite culture where we don't say what we mean, we say what we think people want to hear. From the other side, if someone is not telling you what they think and you're trying to guess, I think that's much more difficult. My advice to Russians would just to say to all their British counterparts, just tell me what you mean. Stop being polite. I'm Russian, I can take it.
Or read Alice in Wonderland, because I think this is an excellent guide for understanding things in the UK and things about the British character.
Yes, talk things through so we decide what works for us. And it's the only way to break down stereotypes is to discuss them and see whether they hold up to the actual light of day or not.